All right, what's up, guys? I hope you're doing well. James here from jamesdforesight.com, and I wanted to kind of think through out loud how QE and QT works, right? Mostly because I was thinking about open market operations from the Fed in general, and thinking about how quantitative tightening works. Because like a lot of the times, whenever the Fed does QT, they're not outright selling treasuries, right? A lot of the times, because treasuries are fixed income, they mature and then basically just roll off. And so a lot of the times, like with operations, when they're talking about like keeping, like if the Fed were to keep the amount of treasuries on their balance sheet steady, they would have to still be buying. They'd have to be a net buyer, I guess just buyer in general, in order to keep the level the same from the ones that are maturing and rolling off. So I was thinking of, since open market operations are kind of used to influence, to create and destroy the amount of bank reserves in the system, or add more, inject more, remove bank reserves, respectively, then how does it happen when they just roll off? Because there's not really a transaction. Because it makes sense on, like, from a transactional purchase, from a transactional point of view, right? So whenever they do QE in general, it makes perfect sense when they're actually buying the treasuries from the primary dealers. So basically, when the Fed buys the treasury, their bank reserves are getting injected into the system, right? Because the Fed creates bank reserves. That's it. So that being said, you would think, okay, if they were selling, it makes sense, because then the bank reserves would go from the the entity buying the treasury back to the Fed, to where they destroy, right? So basically, I was thinking, when those treasuries just roll off, there's no transactions. I was like, what happens, right? And so I was thinking, okay, so the Fed gets the interest from the treasuries, and because it matures and it just gets interest, and all of the income goes back to the treasury at the end of the year and stuff like that, whatever, or the profit, right? So without that, so when the Fed lets the treasuries roll off of their balance sheet, right? And so the treasuries that they bought in the first place are not backed, but they're offset by the bank reserves that they used to buy them, because bank reserves are just the Fed's liabilities, right? And so it's essentially just a credit. And so much like thinking of it from the perspective of like an actual balance sheet, so I would think if that treasury disappears from the Fed's asset side, then those bank reserves would also disappear as well, because it's a balance sheet, it balances, right? And so that was the whole point of the bank reserves in the first place, was to produce or create the credit to buy the treasury to begin with. And this goes for, I guess, the other things that they buy as well, like mortgage-backed securities or other agency-backed securities that the Fed purchases. And so that's kind of what I was thinking. Because mostly with QT, like, that's kind of where I was questioning, because there wasn't a transaction to begin with. So I was kind of confused at first, or trying to think through how that would work with them just rolling off, since I know that's or I've heard, I guess, that's how most of the time that's what they do. They don't just outright sell them into the market, they let them roll off. And so, like, even if the Fed was doing quantitative tightening on that balance, letting the treasuries roll off of their balance sheet, but they were wanting to have it at a lower rate than the amount of rolling off is happening. So, like, let me try to clarify more. So if the treasuries on the Fed's balance sheet were maturing, say, for example, there's $10 million worth rolling off in a specific period, well, they only want to do quantitative tightening to the degree of $5 million, then they would still have to buy $5 million worth of treasuries to make that net balance of $5 million rolling off, right? So there's still two sides of it. It's just trying to, it's like a flow model, I guess. And so you have a certain amount flowing out, and you have to put a certain amount flowing in to get the net balance of what you want, right? And that's kind of, at least how I think about it. That's one thing that has always surprised me, or not always surprised me, but I always thought was pretty interesting, was how accurate it is, or how accurate the analogy with kind of the money and monetary system in general is with liquidity, right? And is really kind of thinking of like water flowing through different systems in a way. At least that's how I think about it, and it seems to make sense. But yeah, just kind of a quick something I was questioning and just thought I would think through out loud. One, because it helps solidify how I'm thinking about it and really helps me think through it and kind of articulate it in a certain way, and maybe also help your guys' questions. Or if I'm completely wrong and you happen to know it, always comment and everything in below. I mean, that's the whole point of the videos. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. So I hope you guys have a good night, and I'll see you on the next one.